Welcome to the Knowledge for Men show. Your life will never be the same.
Your level of success will seldom exceed your level of personal development.
I want to die empty of regret. I want to die empty of my best work. We don't understand who we are. Instead, we're living out somebody else's narrative.
What one man can do, another man can do. If it's been done, it can be done again.
Being yourself and being your truest, most authentic self in every moment. If it scares you or makes you a little afraid, do it. Follow your heart and your gut.
The first stage, I think, is finding you, like finding out who I am today.
Stuff will not work. You will have things that fail. Success is when you're a happy, fulfilled person. How do you define success?
It's your life, and you are the creator of the movie script that is your life story.
Do you ever feel like you're doing the journey alone? Have you ever felt like that you just need someone to talk to, someone who could bring some perspective into your world? Or maybe you're not the type of person who learns from watching video courses or reading books, and you just want to talk with someone specifically about your challenges and how to break through them. I want to introduce you to the High Performance Men's Coaching Program. It's an intensive coaching experience designed to unlock a man's full potential in his life, business, and relationships. Over this past year, I've brought together and trained some of the best coaches in the world to help men step up, stop playing small, and become the strongest versions of themselves. Learn more about High Performance Men's Coaching at kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. You are not alone, and we are here to cut through the crap, hold you accountable, and challenge you so that you can make your dreams become a reality. Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply. All right, guys, welcome to the show. I'm here with Jay Coughlan. He was the president and CEO of Lawson Software, one of the country's largest enterprise software companies. During his tenure as CEO, the company completed a $200 million IPO and grew revenue from $200 million to $430 million. Jay is also the author of 5 Bold Choices, Rise Above Your Circumstances and Redefine Your Life. Jay, welcome to the show.
Andrew, thanks for having me.
Jay, it's a pleasure. And so we start off every show with a favorite quote, some sort of saying that the guest has lived by. It could be a success quote. So what do you got for us, and what does that mean to you?
Back in 1963, John F. Kennedy was in front of the National Prayer Breakfast, and he said, "Don't pray for easier lives. Pray to be stronger men." And for me, that resonates because I think there's too many of us who are really just trying to go through life easily or trying to take the easier route. And what I've found is that life is full of opportunities and challenges, but none of them are easy. So the reality is it makes a lot of sense for me to be, let's not just pray for this thing to be easy. Let's pray for me to have the wherewithal to persevere and be stronger, to be able to handle any of those opportunities or challenges that come my way.
I like that. And what do you think that says about a man who is looking for that easy path, where he's constantly trying to find what is easy, what is simple, what is the path of least effort?
I think, Andrew, that individual, just trying to be generic about it, doesn't have a good definition or a vision of who he really wants to become. And because of that, he's more than likely to take that easier path, or to try to do, instead of taking the harder right, he'll take the easier wrong. And if you don't have a vision for who you want to become, I think it's really easy to fall into that trap of, either becoming someone where mediocrity comes into place, or you go through life comfortably numb. Either way is a bad spot to be in.
And I mean, you've been around a lot of really successful people, I'm sure. And what do you think of a man who is constantly looking for, to improve himself, to grow, to become stronger so that he can go after his vision and go after his goals?
That's what I end up talking about a lot in my 5 choices, is how you go about doing that. And I think without having that focus, you're just, one, I don't think you can do it. How do you even separate what's important from what's urgent? But the people that fall into that camp, that type A type of personality that falls into it, usually the only struggle they have sometimes is remaining in balance. So my thing is, how do you achieve more while, remaining in balance as well?
Okay. And by balance, you mean not just focusing on work and goals, but also having fun and pleasure.
Sure. And balance could also be, what are you doing with your relationships? What are you doing with your values? Health. What do you have, health, all those things. Because what I found is when I've gotten out of balance, or when I coach men and they're out of balance, usually something's going to break if you don't figure it out.
And so here you've written this book, 5 Bold Choices. What led you to write this book?
Well, I had an accident back in '98 where I was unfortunately made the wrong and poor decision to drink and drive. And while I was driving home, I missed a turn, went down a hill, and I hit a train at 60 miles an hour. And unfortunately, it was my dad and I, and my dad was killed in the crash. And as I laid in pieces in Hennepin County Trauma Center, I remember looking up and seeing my mom and my wife. And my mom, I could just see something was terribly wrong. And she leaned down to me and said, "Your dad didn't make it." And I'm going to tell you, Andrew, you don't know what pain is until you hear something like that. And for the next 3 days, I went through tons of operations, and I was just tormented as I was sitting in these hospital rooms. And my wife looked at me and looked in my eyes and said, "You were gone and weren't coming back." And so one day, nobody was in the room, and a gentleman came in and talked about being a sinner and, was asking about forgiveness. And I said a prayer with him, and I accepted the Lord into my life, and it started to change things. But after that, I was, I still had to go through all the operations. I had to get out of the hospital. And when I did, I actually was sitting in my driveway in my wheelchair, reading a letter from the state saying, "We are now prosecuting you for criminal vehicular homicide." And so my journey took me through a trial, took me to jail, and, I had to go through all that and had to hold my life together. And as I was doing all that, it really became apparent that what choices were I making? What choices was I making that were going to impact me on an ongoing basis? And the book just came, even though it was 18 years later, was a byproduct of me out talking to people, talking to different groups, and finding out really what's really stopping people from trying to define who they really want to be. And at the end of the day, Andrew, I did not want to be defined by my worst moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was my motivators. I did not want to be defined by something that was the worst thing I ever did. So the reality is, what did I do? What choices did I make to not allow that to happen? And that's really what the book's about.
Jay, I really appreciate your vulnerability and sharing such a tragic incident. And is it okay if I explore that day a little bit further?
Sure.
Do you remember the last thing or the conversation that you had with your dad before the accident?
No, but I remember lots of conversations I had with my dad. We had a pretty tight relationship. I would say this wasn't the first time we were out drinking and driving, so I'm not trying to paint an altar boy picture for you. It was sort of our normal behavior. But my dad was a lot of things, but at the end of the day, I respected him, appreciated him, and I knew he loved me because he told me that.
Yeah, it's a very tough conversation to have here, even struggling myself to have this with you. I'm wondering, what kind of process did you go through, not only grieving the loss of your father, but being a part of that incident? What were you telling yourself to get through this? I can't imagine, actually. I was going to say I could imagine. I can't imagine, the nights, the weeks and the months and potentially the years after. What would you tell yourself to get through that situation?
Well, I think one of the things was, the main thing was I found a faith that I never had before, which was extremely important in terms of receiving forgiveness.
Right.
I also received forgiveness from my mom and my brothers and my sisters. So, in terms of healing, that was extremely important. I had a strong family. I had a strong friend network that was there as I was trying to get through this. But what was really compounding it, Andrew, was, just because I had this newfound faith didn't mean that everything just became better. I mean, I still had all the rehabilitation to go through. I had a trial. I was going to end up going to jail. So really the issue was, how was I managing through this nightmare that kept getting worse and worse and worse?
I mean, just even listening to this here, I think it provides a lot of perspective. This is a really challenging, difficult stage in your life, if you will, that you went through, and it sounds like you have come through. You have learned a lot, and you've written a book sharing those lessons. I think it puts a lot of perspective in for the audience. Like, look at your problems right now, and this is a very serious problem here. Not to discount anyone else's problems, but this to me is really, a tragic scenario. And I'm curious, on your journey, what were the lessons that you learned? Because you said this was decades ago.
You think the lessons was, I had to go back and think through it, because the reality was, when you're in it, you're just fighting for your life and you're just trying to figure it out. It's not till afterwards. It's not like I was going through it and I go, wow, I can't wait to write this book 18 years from now.
Yeah,
Right. But I'll give you one. My daughter, who was about 10 at the time, was coming in to visit me. And the nurses had, they said, your daughter's coming in. And I was like, well, what do I look like? And they held up a mirror to me and I go, I look terrible. I mean, there's no way she's looking, you got to clean me up. I mean, I had that yellowish gray deaf look, my hair was a mess. I said, you got to clean me up, even though I'm hooked up to a bunch of machines here. And the nurses did a great job, at least cleaning me up and, washing me up a little bit. And so when my daughter came in, she didn't see a wreck. And what that was the beginnings of accountability. Stepping in, which is one of my choices. It was like, hey, you got to get it together here. You're not allowed to lay in this bed. You got your daughter coming in here to see you. You got 2 young boys. You're a father. Laying in the bed's not an option. You got to start kicking this thing into gear. You got a definition called dad, and that means a lot. And dad can't stay in bed here. And so the beginnings of accountability, which is one of my choices, started to click into gear once my daughter came in to see me. And that's when I started to come out of the fog, where I started to say, wait a minute, one of your options, in my opinion, isn't to lay in bed and do woe is me.
Yeah. And in the process, you had to face trial, and you said you went to jail. How long were you in jail for?
Well, the trial lasted 7 months. And by the way, I don't know if you've ever been in a horror story like this where you close your eyes at night and you're thinking about it. And the first thing you open up your eyes in the morning, you're thinking about it. Because I'm in a trial. And by the way, I'm guilty.
Yeah.
This is not me spinning this thing. I'm guilty.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm getting educated by my lawyers. And they're saying, hey, Jay, if everything lines up right, you won't have to do 4 years in prison. You'll only do 2 years in jail. And I was like, what's plan B? Because that ruins my life. And so reality, when you're doing this process, I'm trying to keep my job together, and I'm, in a wheelchair, so everything's arduous. And people are coming up to me and they're saying, oh, don't worry, Jay, you won't have to go to jail. It was your dad, And what they weren't getting educated on the system that I was. I was starting to understand what the felony grid was all about. So I was meeting my lawyers 2-3 times a week. And for me, they weren't dealing with realistic hope. They were dealing with unrealistic hope. And I had to deal with realistic hope because I had a lot of moving parts I had to manage, including family and job and everything else. And I had to deal with realistic hope. So I would manage with my lawyers on a daily basis, trying to figure out how we would deal with this. So you fast forward to the actual Lawson software who I was working for at the time had an event in New Orleans, and I missed the first day, missed the first night, missed most of the second day. And I came up to the stage to speak, and there was about 300 people in this audience, and they gave me a standing ovation. And when I got up to the microphone, what I felt like saying, Andrew, was, yesterday I was sentenced to 6 months in jail, 10 years probation.
Wow.
And what I talk to people about is I'll say, what kind of roller coaster ride are you on? Because going to jail, standing ovation, custom suit, orange suit. What kind of scenario and hills and valleys you're going to go through, and then how you're going to get through them in life. Because for me,
what did you tell yourself in that moment when did you feel like you were a fraud on stage there when you're getting a standing ovation? What was going on through your mind in that moment?
No, it was just a classic roller coaster. And this is one of the highlights of my business career, was to get a standing ovation from my peer group. It was one of those moments that you'll always remember. It was just one of those weird things that I could also say, wow, I can't really say this to everybody, but for as good as I feel right now, as soon as I fly back to Minnesota, I'm going to jail. And it was just that kind of ride. So now I had a new faith that I could go to that could help me through this. I had new people. I always tell you, I got forgiveness from God. I did not get forgiveness from the state. There is always consequences for your behavior. And by the way, rightfully so.
Rightfully so. Yeah. So how long did you end up getting?
I got 6 months, and then I had 10 years probation. The goal for me on the 6 months was how do I manage through this, and I ended up doing some of it in jail, and I ended up doing some of it on home where you had like an ankle bracelet on.
And coming from that experience, you wrote this book here, and you've gone through quite the roller coaster. And a day or a week before that incident, I'm sure you had a new set of you had an older set of problems, and then this scenario popped in and gave you a different perspective on the problems that you got going on in your life. I'm sure that you had a big reality check.
I always tell people, Andrew, when you're in Hennepin County Trauma Center, you're not thinking about your boat.
So
you're thinking about a lot of things, but your boat's not one of them. So.
Were you at any point after the accident in your own health at risk of, how serious were your injuries?
I have a bunch of metal in me. I got a bunch of scars. I couldn't walk for a while. I got a plate in my hip. I got new knees, and so I was shattered. But no, I was never in a situation where I thought I was going to die. Although if I could show you pictures of the Jeep, you would say it's a miracle that you got out of there, and my dad didn't.
This goes to one of your points in your book about clarity, keeping the important things important. Maybe you had, or perhaps the audience has things that they're focused on and stressed on, and they're really getting beat up about the unimportant things in life.
It's amazing to me how many people go through life and don't understand or don't even have a North Star or a focus or clarity.
Why? Why do you think they don't have that? I of course understand.
I think
why.
There's two reasons why. One is everybody's busy, and we wear busyness as a badge of honor, but busyness doesn't mean you're actually accomplishing anything. John Wooden, the famous coach from UCLA, said, never confuse activity with achievement. And for me, one of the questions I ask people when I'm with them or coaching them is, what are you trying to achieve? I know you're busy. I didn't ask if you're busy. Everybody will tell you how busy they are. I'm asking you, are you achieving anything? And the only way you can achieve stuff is to have focus where you can prioritize things that become important to you, and you get through the noise of the urgency factor. And for me, if you don't have focus, there's no way you can do that. The way I did it personally, Andrew, is I was a big goal setter. So I was setting goals for myself, writing them down and so forth, and eventually learned how to make them SMART goals. But I don't care how you do it. My daughter is she just graduated med school 2 years ago, and she's studying to be she's in residency for a general surgeon. She doesn't write down her goals, but she's laser beam focused on being a doctor. So to me, it doesn't matter how you get the focus, but you just need to have some focus, because if you don't, there's just no way you're going to achieve anything. You'll just never be able to prioritize.
So what would you say to someone right now who feels like they don't have focus and that they're in a hamster wheel right now, and it's been like that for years?
I would say you got to take a step back and start to ask yourself some questions and give yourself time. I have 2 sons in college, and we have a tendency in college to ask college, men and women, the famous question, which is, what are you going to do? Right? What are you going to do in life?
Yeah.
And my attitude is that's a question you need to embrace for the rest of your life. And you should always be asking yourself a question, what are you going to do? Because even when you have a North Star, you should be challenging it. And by the way, I'm 58 today, and I've got a whole new North Star of things I want to do. I go coaching, I do keynote speaking, I wrote a book. So the reality is you should be asking this question for the rest of your life, and you should embrace the question. And you actually have to put a little time and energy and effort into solving the answer.
So that North Star changes.
It changes.
There's different stages of life where that North Star can be one thing, and as you grow, it can be another.
Correct. I mean, for me, if you had to went back to the accident, my focus was becoming a CEO. I ended up doing that. Took a company public in 2001, been a CEO of a publicly traded company for 12 years. So half of the accolades I get about success are associated with what I did in my business career. I also happen to mention, I'm also a convicted felon, and in the midst of a skyrocketing career, went to jail for a little while. Wouldn't recommend that to you, but don't tell me that you can't define and be who you want to be. I'm the wrong person to talk that way, because I think you can do whatever you want to do if you actually put your right mind to it, attention, resources, and so forth. My big thing is I get a little bit upset is I think people become a victim of their circumstance. And therefore, they get stuck in life. And once they get stuck in life, then they like to have all the excuses. And I'm the worst person to talk to about that, because I'm a reality of saying you can, as long as you got hope, as long as you can persevere, you can do anything in life.
Yeah, those are powerful words. And what do you say to someone when you're in an audience speaking and they hear your story and they get really turned off that you're giving this advice, although very valid, but you're responsible for the accident? How do you respond to that? What have you come to find?
For me, there is, like I said, there's consequences for your behavior, and I paid, society back for that. I have a relationship with my family, so I paid a huge price for the mistakes that I've made. I'm out now talking to people so that, one, you don't make some of the same mistakes I've made.
Yeah.
And two, I want you to actually understand that there's hope. There's no matter what situation you're in, there's hope. It takes effort, but there's hope. So my story is a story of perseverance, is a story of faith, and is a story of hope. And that's what I'm really trying to get across to people. You can be anything you want to be. You can be defined any way you want to be defined. You need to understand you have to have that North Star, the starting point. But I think what I find, unfortunately, Andrew, is that, like I said earlier, life demands a response when you have opportunities and challenges. And too many people, they just default. Yep. When they default, they procrastinate, yep. they don't make decisions. And unfortunately, I see way too many people just living comfortably numb. And I don't know why you do that, but I know a lot of people do. And I'm here to try to inspire you to say, hey, there's a better way. You can appreciate life that much more if you actually just, follow some of the choices that I did. None of the stuff I'm talking about is rocket scientist. You just got to do it.
Yeah. So despite deep, extreme circumstance, you can turn around. No matter how low and how bad it gets, no matter what, you're looking at, when you're in bed, like you can turn around, you can change.
You can change. I mean, I'm chairman of a group in Minnesota called Minnesota Adult and Teen Challenge, and deals with drug addiction. Uh-huh. And you see some people who are at the bottom of the barrel, and as long as they have hope, they have accountability, they have infrastructure, they can make it. I mean, you got to give up the addiction, right? You can't keep the addiction.
Right.
But there's always hope. There's always more choices than people think that they have. One of the most amazing things I see when people are in the victims of their circumstances is they don't think they have choices.
Yeah.
And my attitude is you always have choices. Even in my worst moment, I had choices. Some of them were just get through the day, right? But you always have choices.
So this message really resonates with, my philosophy and what this whole podcast and for the listeners, I'm sure they're really hooked in and tuned in on this conversation about really changing and turning things around. But what really upsets me is when people just won't do it, when they actually know they can turn around, they've heard all these stories and they know it's possible, but they still won't do it.
Well, one of my choices is accountability. One of the things I find is most people assume accountability or don't like accountability or don't want to have accountability. And my attitude is, look, we're on a journey. You got to take some people along the way with you. And some of the worst advice we get, Andrew, is, suck it up. And suck it up means go on the journey by yourself. And nothing could be further from the truth. Yeah. What I find is the more change that I have coming in my life, the more accountability I need. And I don't view accountability as negative. I view it as motivational. And I would ask, if you're trying to go through this thing called life, where are you getting your encouragement from? And for me, accountability is all about getting encouragement, getting some real people around you to actually, hold you accountable to what you said you're going to do. And it's about continuous learning. When you succeed at something, I'll say to you, one, are you celebrating it? Or most men especially just move on and go to the next thing. I go, whoa, wait a minute, celebrate. Life's a journey. You got to get some energy, whatever way you want to celebrate, but make sure you're celebrating, because the question I'm asking is, what did you do right? Because you might want to repeat it. And then in the area of accountability that most people associate it with it, failure, my attitude is you're going to fail. I failed more than most. I got all sorts of quotes. If you're not failing, you're not trying. So for me, my issue was just what can you learn from it? Mm-hmm. And whether I failed as an individual or I failed as a group, and again, I could argue I failed a lot more than most. I always did this same 3-question exercise.
Let's do it.
And the question, they went like this. First question was, what did I or what did we do right? Now, most of the time when people fail, what's the question they ask? What did you do wrong?
Yeah.
I start with, what did you do right? Because I'm going to tell you, in most cases, you're doing a lot of things right. And let's focus on what we've done right. And I'm also trying to change the paradigm of the questions right from the first one. Second question I'll ask is, with the value of hindsight, which you now have, time, new data, new information, what would you do differently? What would you do differently now that you have this different paradigm of looking back at the situation? And the third question is, what are you going to change? Because there might be 10 things you would do differently, but you can only change 2 of them. Well, change the 2. And so for me, accountability comes about continuous learning. And you do that by taking some people along with you, and that whole group can learn, or that one-on-one individual can learn. The biggest thing I would say, Andrew, is when you get to accountability. If I see you in the morning and we walk by each other, or we're going to have breakfast, and you say, Jay, how you doing? And I say, fine. And I say, Andrew, how you doing? You say, fine. I think the only thing we've established up to this point is that both of us are lying. because the reality
Yeah, that's
is
very
life
true.
is a challenge. And if you, I'm not talking about just passing in the hallway.
Yeah,
I'm talking about if we're sitting down to really help each other out.
right.
And there's a lot of good things going on in your life probably, and there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And I should be somebody that's helping you through on that journey.
Yeah.
And we all need that. And so for the people that aren't doing anything about it, I'd start with, you need some people to go on the journey with you.
Absolutely. And I think where some men may find that difficult is they might think that, no, I need to do it by myself. I need to be this hero. I am going to get this done. I don't need help, as if asking for help or asking for accountability or seeking it is a form of weakness.
And that view of life destroys men.
Yes.
Because when you don't have some tribe to go to, or friends to go to, or accountability partners to go to, you isolate yourself. And once you isolate yourself, then look, there's a whole bunch of self-medicating ways to help yourself, and all of them are bad, right? All of them are bad. None of them are good, right? And I'm not anti people doing things, but the reality is if you don't have a group that can go on a journey with you, most of the ways you go to solve your problems are bad.
Yeah, I think men have, in some cases, taught themselves how to do it alone, maybe earlier in life. But I think as you get older, life gets more challenging, and that strategy is no longer going to work, and you're going to bang your head against the wall. And I think it's just, why would you want to get to the end of the journey and be alone anyways?
That's probably the scariest thing. But one of the reasons I wrote the book was because I'm out speaking about this a lot, and I'll come off the stage and mainly men will come up to me and share things about their life that you would argue might be a little bit inappropriate, especially when there's 10 people still behind you in line. And it happens all the time, Andrew. And the reason I think it happens is, one, I just shared how vulnerable and how much of an idiot I was, right? And then two, I really think they come to me because they don't have anywhere else to go, and they don't think I'll judge them. And the biggest thing we have with men is we worry if they're safe.
Yeah, they're safe.
And the biggest problem we have with men is we're worried about showing that soft underbelly because you think people are going to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And the reality is you still got to find a network, even with that said, of people that you can trust and that can hold you accountable and encourage you along the way.
Yeah.
And I will say this, the best way to learn about accountability is to become an accountability partner for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the best learnings for you, because you'll realize the additional level of questions you really need to ask your friend if you really want to help them.
Yeah. What I feel happens in those scenarios when you're speaking on stage is you're being vulnerable on stage. Therefore, you've opened the door for others to be vulnerable. You've shown that it's safe to be vulnerable. And I think the listeners, you can do that same thing. And next time you're driving with someone, you're talking to someone, you're on the phone with someone, you lead, and it allows others to follow suit. So you mentioned something earlier, and you said, a lot of men are being comfortably numb. What can you paint? I like that. I mean, not that I like what that is, but it's a good point. Can you paint a picture of what that looks like for us? What is a man who is comfortably numb?
So it's another word I have for it is stuck. They're stuck in life. And this is what it sounds like. Jay, is this all there is to life? Jay, I'm not where I want to be in my career. Jay, how come I'm so worn out? How come I'm so tired? And my favorite, Andrew, is, Jay, I had all these dreams and aspirations, and then I had kids. Like the kids are the problem. So what happens is people get stuck. And they get stuck in my vernacular is they become victims of their circumstance. And that comfortably numb is they're just not making any decisions. They're just, either taking the easy or wrong, or they're just ignoring them. They're procrastinating. And life's going to throw opportunities and challenges at you all day long. And like I said, they're going to demand a response. That doesn't mean some men respond. Some of them just have agreed to procrastinate, and then they become victims of their circumstance. And my attitude is I see way too many men doing that. And my biggest selling point to you is life is a lot better than that. Life can be so much more appreciated than that. There's just so much more to life than just living comfortably numb.
When you're not living comfortably numb, you're probably taking more risk in your life. You're probably, leaning towards the edge of your comfort zone. How do you think most men view risk, and how do you view taking risk?
Well, I think it's been fun writing this book with Larry Julian because we were completely different. He would describe me as a high risk high reward type of person. I've got tons of scars on my body to probably prove that type A type of behavior, right? Larry, on the other hand, is somebody that takes life a little bit, slower, a lot less risk, adverse. But at the end of the day, both of us still have choices to make. And those choices can be real big, grandioso choices or small choices. So no matter what your profile is, i.e. more of a risk taker like me or less like Larry, you still got choices. You still have to have that North Star. You still got to have that encouragement. You still got to be able to have the confidence to get through life. You still got to have to be in balance. So I don't think it's as much about how much my profile is of how much I would, assess risk as much as it is all of us need to understand that there's an appreciation in this life. There's appreciation for this journey that's available to all of you, no matter how much your risk abilities are.
I like that. And thanks for sharing. And so we have the 5 bold choices. We've covered accountability, taking responsibility for your life journey. We've gone into clarity, keeping the important things important. And you have 3 others here. So if you could go in with adaptability and why that's important for us.
Well, I think adaptability, a lot of people refer to as change management. I think it's a lot more than that. I think if I can get off the quick point of adaptability, it's just you need to understand that you got to have that view that you're going to adapt, and you got to anticipate that change is going to happen. The exercise I would go through with you if you were in front of me would be in the last 5 years, what did you have to adapt to personally and professionally and maybe with your health? And I'll say, by the way, as you go back and you think through that, the iPad and all is probably only, 6, 7 years old. So social media is relatively new. And how much has that changed your personal life and your professional life in the last 5 years? And people start thinking through it. And I'll say, well, once you start realizing how much you've changed in the last 5 years, you're going to have to change at least that much in the next 5, both professionally, personally, maybe in health, maybe in relationships. And I'm trying to just get you to is just to anticipate it. Now, I've grown up in the technology industry, so, adapting to change has been in my DNA. And, in a classic example of Larry, the other co-author of the book, he doesn't adapt to real easily. But at the end of the day, both of us, as we look forward to the next 10 years or next 5 years, you have to anticipate that you're going to have to change some way, shape, or form. So don't fight it. Don't fight it. Embrace it, as you go forward.
Absolutely. I think a lot of life happens to us when we least expect it, and our ability to handle how we react to those events can really shape, much of our life and also our character, especially as men. So you have a rather simple one here, confidence. I think we all can understand why this is important, but what is your view and take on why confidence is so critical here?
I think confidence gives you the credibility. I mean, you see somebody, you can look at them and say that's a confident person and not. Now, I'm not talking about arrogant. I'm talking about confidence. The reality is you need confidence because it gives you the credibility for all the other things you're trying to do and trying to become. In order to be confident, I always say there's 2 things. One is you need to be prepared. So, in any given situation, you're going to be only as confident as prepared you are, whether that's a speech you're giving, a ball game you're ready to get to play, whatever it might be. You have to be prepared. But the other piece that most people don't deal with is what I call knowing the truth. You need to know the truth about your situation. And I think this is where the negative self-talk can come in and destroy people. So if I was in my trial, let me give you how the negative self-talk worked for me. It started with, if I go to jail for 4 years, I lose my job. I lose my job, I lose my house. I lose my house, I lose my wife. Now, my wife is an asset for me. I've been married 28 years. Unfortunately, in that trial, that was one of the better or worse times of life. But she was an asset for me. But I could take a bad situation and pile on and make it worse with negative self-talk. And I find with confidence, there's so many times that negative self-talk is impacting men. And you're listening to it, and it's between your ears, and it doesn't make any sense, and you got to get rid of it. You got to throw that crap, that junk mail out, and because it's just impacting your confidence. And quite frankly, you can do this with accountability partners because you can talk to people. But sometimes, I don't know if you've ever done this, Andrew, where you're thinking in your head and it makes sense, and as soon as I start talking to you about it, I go, wow, it doesn't make any sense, but just 10 minutes ago it made sense in my head, and it doesn't make any sense as it's coming out of my mouth because it's not true. And part of it, knowing the truth, is understanding the reality of your situation so that you can deal with it and don't pile on with the negative self-talk.
Yeah. I think how we talk to ourselves, because it's happening we're doing it to ourselves. No one's doing it to you. You're the one doing it when you're having the negative self-talk, which is what I think is interesting. You can give two people the same situation and one person isn't doing the negative self-talk and another is, and there can be two different outcomes there.
And the reality is, like I said, it's just what's the truth.
Yeah.
What's the truth of
what
the
are the facts on the table here?
Yeah.
And the last one here, you alluded to it earlier, but balance, choosing the harder right over the easier wrong.
Yeah, balance is about life's a marathon, not a sprint. And most of the executives I end up coaching are sprinting. And my caution is you're not going to make it. Trust me.
Why? Why?
Well, if you're out of balance and you're sprinting, and let's just say work is causing you to be out of balance. I'll give you my real life example of me. I was CEO of a public company, and you can go from fourth gear to fifth gear, which is a nice way of saying you're going from 50 hours a week to 60, 70 hours a week. And that was normal. And then occasionally you go into sixth gear, and that meant you're doing 80, 90 hours a week, right? And for me, that was warped because that started to feel normal, and I could do it. The problem was, who was I really impacting? My family,
right.
My health,
right.
My friends, all things that I needed in order to make the long journey of life. But I could certainly justify it if I had to. The problem is I wouldn't make the long journey if that's where I stayed. And I got a lot of examples of men that I've met later in life that gave it all for some job or career and only to find themselves, that we described earlier, lonely, an ugly place to be. So for me, when I go through this exercise, I'll start to say, what is it that you like to do, Andrew? Give me a list of energy giving activities that you like. And for me, that's outdoor activities, a lot of, hunting, fishing, biking, skiing, motorcycle, and all those kind of, energy giving activities. And I would go through it with you and they say, give me the list. And then I say, we got this 168 rule. And 168 is one of the few things in life that's fair. It's how many hours you got in a week. You don't get 169. I don't get 167. And I'll say, Andrew, how much time do you sleep? If you say 7 hours a night, I go 7 times 7, 49, round it up to 50. I go, how many hours a week do you work? Just to say, round it to 50. Well, that's 100. So we got 68 hours to fit in all these other activities for the rest of your week. Oh, how much time do you really work? 50 or is it 60? How much time do you spend on the computer? How much time do you spend watching TV? And 68 quickly becomes 38, 28, 18. And what I find is most people aren't doing energy-giving activities. They're just busy because they're not managing the 168 rule.
Wow.
And then they say to me, how come I'm so tired and how come I'm so worn out? All I got to do is go to 168 rule and go, well, you're not doing anything that gives you any energy. That's why you're tired. That's why you're worn out. Yeah. You have to figure out how to get those activities into your week, or maybe a week's not realistic, but at least into your month, or certainly how you get a few in every 3 months, because life's a marathon. Not a sprint.
Absolutely. That's very powerful. I think balance is key. I think so much of the information that is out there is telling us to work more or to crush it or to be obsessed or to grind harder, when in fact, the person saying that might not have it all figured out is what I think.
Right. By the way, I'm not anti-work hard. I mean, you're going to work
I think
hard.
there are seasons. I think there are seasons where you do need to work hard, especially in the beginning of any great endeavor. You have to work hard. I love the feeling of hustle, but I think to your point that balance will allow you to continue that hustle.
Yes, and hopefully over time be able to, accept the rewards for some of that behavior.
Of course.
Not be dead.
Right, absolutely, or sick or something. There's two powerful questions you ask in your book. I want to share them here with the audience. It is, what if the very things you fear and avoid are the very portals of your success and significance as a leader at work and at home? And then the second one is and what if those hurdles are really stepping stones to your best life?
Yep. Because you think about it, for me, by readjusting my life after that accident, I started to prioritize things a little bit differently. I prioritized, I had a faith now, I had a family that I prioritized. If you actually went and looked at the goals I had written down on January 1st, 1998 versus the ones I wrote down 6 months later, the prioritization changed.
Wow. Yeah.
Now, with that said, I mean, I ended up, getting out of jail, got my career back on track. And the reason people listen to me is I'll state this fact. December 7th, 2001, I ended up taking Lawson Software public. We raised $200 million, had a $1.4 billion market cap, fifth largest IPO in Minnesota history. And I'll go back. I just did this at a commencement back in May. I said, January 3rd, 1998, I got in an accident. I was in Hennepin County Medical Center in trauma and pieces. Went through a trial, went to jail, got out of jail, got my career back on track. December 7th, 2001, took loss in public. In less time than it took you to get your college degrees, I went from convict to CEO. And That's a story of perseverance. That's a story of hope. That's a story of faith. And the question really comes down to those hurdles that I went through, ultimately the ones that allowed me to understand that the journey was worth appreciating, that I understood that it was a lot more than just what I was doing at work, that I wanted to take a lot of people along with me. It added humility to my story. So there was unbelievable blessings in all those hurdles. I wouldn't wish those hurdles on anybody, but ultimately they made me who I became.
Yeah, I think, you wouldn't wish those on anyone, but they were your hurdles that life threw at you, and you took ownership and found the lessons to continue on. And you've done great things since.
And I see people all day long, Andrew, they really are at those crossroads. And the only question is, what choices are you going to make now that you're at a crossroads? You can go into comfortably numb, you can go into woe is me, or you can actually try to redefine who you're going to be. I spent no time listening to the people telling me that I couldn't do something.
Yeah.
No way. People were saying, you're a convicted felon. You no way can you run a public company. I spent no time listening to those people. I spent all my time focused on how I was going to make it work.
Yeah. Oh, powerful words here. I want to take you into the knowledge round. Just have a few more questions here, so your answers will just be kind of gut responses, what first comes to mind here. So Jay, are you ready for the knowledge round?
Sure.
So you might be wondering, why would I ever invest in a coach? I've never done anything like that before. Well, it's going to shorten your learning curve and save you the time that it would take to achieve your goal. You can avoid making mistakes that you would otherwise make. You'll get more results because everything will be tailored to your specific needs and challenges. The coach will hold you accountable so you can't procrastinate, so you can't be lazy, so you can't say, I didn't have the time. You'll be challenged and pushed harder than you've ever been pushed. You'll have conversations so powerful that you'll feel more energized, alive, and confident and certain about the goals that you have in front of you and where you want to go, but most importantly, where you want to be. You'll go farther than you've ever gone before when you have a coach. If you want to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program, go to kfmcoach.com. Again, that's kfmcoach.com to learn more about our high performance men's coaching program. You have got to understand that every successful person in the world invests in coaching to go from good to great. And if you're already a high achiever, then how much more could you achieve if you had a high performance men's coach at your side to push you even further? Go to kfmcoach.com to learn more and apply for our high performance men's coaching program. Again, that's kfmcoach.com. Welcome to the Knowledge Round, where the guests will be asked rapid fire questions to give the audience invaluable pieces of wisdom to help transform their lives. Starting in 3, 2, 1, showtime. First question, what advice would you give to someone who's feeling really lost and unsure of their purpose?
I would say first there's an awareness question, and it'd be the awareness of why. Why are you in this spot? What are you doing that's causing you to be in this situation? And once you get the awareness of it, then we start figuring out what's sucking your energy. Why are you there? And how are we going to start changing the behavior? And I just go through my choices. Do you have clarity of where you want to go? Do you have accountability to motivate you? Do you understand that you need confidence, and what's stopping you from having your confidence? To me, the answer to your question, Andrew, is I want to figure out an awareness of where they are, why they're there, and then what are we doing about it?
Yeah, great. What do you think is holding most men back from becoming stronger, grounded men today?
I think the number one thing is clarity, just understanding where they want to go and why. And then the second would be they don't have any motivation, encouragement through accountability. Yeah. They're trying to do it on their own.
Yeah. And so your book here is 5 Bold Choices, Rise Above Your Circumstances and Redefine Your Life. So I want to give credit to your work here. But for yourself, what have been 3 of your most influential books that have helped you rise above your circumstances and change your life? And why have you chosen these books?
The number one book would be the Bible. That's actually had probably the most impact on me. In addition to that, I just gave a book to my kids for Christmas that I had received from my godfather when I was just getting out of college. And it's Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's just a classic book that describes how you interact with people and how little basic stuff that will separate you from other people around you. It's just a classic book. The third book that had a big impact on me was a book called Crossing the Chasm by Jeff Moore. And Jeff Moore is a Silicon Valley guru of marketing and became a good friend and a coach for me. And Crossing the Chasm is all about strategy and how do you segment markets. And it's ingrained in me as I'm out coaching executives. So I can look at markets and strategies all predicated on the philosophy of Crossing the Chasm by Jeff Moore.
All right, great books. I'll have to throw some of those into the wish list here, as I'm always reading books that the guests recommend, and I know the audience does as well. So next question here is more of a scenario, and this is rather difficult for me to ask you here due to the nature of this episode, but imagine you had 60 seconds with your 25-year-old self. If you can envision where he's at personally, professionally, and in his relationships, what would you tell 25-year-old Jay to do and not to do?
Well, a few key things. One, it's the number one thing I would tell young Jay, it's not about you. Start learning that life's about giving, not just getting. And then stop the destructive behavior. You had some things that are really destructive and they're going to cause you a lot of pain. And the last one, I would say, hurry up and do some of those activities, because later in life you can't go, big wave surfing or kite surfing because you got a bunch of injuries. So go do them when you're young.
All right. All right. And just, what comes to mind here when I ask you, what's your philosophy on life and success?
For me, it's literally about having clarity. To me, people always say, hey, how did you, a guy that grew up in, Philadelphia, in my neighborhood, we always laughed that there was a couple of the kids were going to Penn State, but more of my friends were going to the state Penn. And so how did you actually get out and do this? And I would say, in addition to faith, the ability to persevere is by the fact that I always had clarity. I always understood where I was going and what I was trying to accomplish. And the biggest thing I can impart on people is to say, have clarity so you can determine and keep the important things important.
Yeah, really good. All right. That's going to wrap up the knowledge around there. And so what's exciting you now today? What's getting you out of bed in the morning?
What's fun for me is I do a lot of executive coaching. I still coach some entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, I would call millennials. Getting out on the speaking circuit and getting this message out is getting me up in the morning. So I'm having fun. I'm enjoying it because I get a chance to influence people, but I would say mainly men. And when you get something like that, that's a real gift, and that's been a joy, and something I plan on doing for the next 15, as long as I remain healthy. So.
All right. Many years to come. And so for the audience, you can follow up with Jay at truebalance.com, and it's TRUbalanced.com. You can also go to Amazon and check out his book, 5 Bold Choices, Rise Above Your Circumstances and Redefine Your Life. And Jay, this has been an extremely vulnerable show. So thank you for leading the charge and being comfortable having this conversation. I'm confident that your story and your lessons will have a huge impact on thousands of listeners today.
Andrew, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Knowledge for Men podcast. Hundreds of interviews and millions of downloads later, we're continuing to build an international movement, and we're just getting started. So if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and leave a helpful review in iTunes, because it really helps the podcast grow so we can impact even more men in the world who need this. Guys, this is all about living with purpose, where every day you only do things that matter to you. You wake up, live with purpose, and take massive action towards the life you want. And always remember, love the life you have while creating the life of your dreams. Go to kfmfree.com to get a surprise bonus I've made for my listeners. Again, that's kfmfree.com for something that's changed my life, and I'm offering it to you for free. Also, check out my Amazon best-selling books that I've written for you to help you crush life at kfmauthor.com. Again, that's kfmauthor.com to see all the books I've created to help you break through in life. This is your host, Andrew Farabee, founder of knowledgeformen.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.